Yeah, there's a lot of great conversations going on. But next we're going to have Rabbi Avigayil Halpern. She is a writer and educator focusing on queer and feminist Torah. She is a regular contributor to Jewish Currents weekly Parshah Commentary, an adjunct Talmud faculty member at Hebrew College, and is currently at work on a book about queer niddah and Jewish sexual ethics and law. She has served as a scholar in residence at the Hadassah-Brandeis Institute and was recognized as one of the New York Jewish Week's 36 under 36 in 2021. I won't read the rest, but she has a Substack that you can look up, that you should subscribe to. It's well worth it. And here she is.
I sent you the whole bio. I was like, you want a bio? Have
it. There's a lot of stuff that you've done.
Hi. Hello. My impulse is always to say good Shabbos. Okay. So I want just by a show of hands, how many of you have ever asked a rabbi or someone by another title with rabbinic training a halachic question? Okay. Amazing. So majority, but not all. That's excellent. Okay. I want to do popcorn style. I think for a minute, what is a feeling you felt in the process of asking that question? You are allowed one word. I don't want you to tell me the story. I just want you to think about what was it like emotionally at any point. What was an emotion you felt in that process? And just raise your hand when you've got something. And if you have never asked a rabbi a halachic question, I would like to also invite you to share what is a feeling you imagine feeling when you think about asking a rabbi a halachic question? And if that insofar as you have feelings about it. Yeah, Mimi.
Scared.
Scared. Awesome. I mean, not awesome, but thank you for your contribution. Yeah.
Trepidation.
Trepidation. Yeah.
Unsatisfied.
Okay, unsatisfied. Yeah.
Embarrassment.
Embarrassment? Yeah.
I think relief.
Relief, okay. Any last feelings in the room?
Is there anything from the Zoom?
Oh, is there anything in the Zoom chat?
No.
Okay. Hi, Zoom people. Okay.
Scared works, I guess.
You got scared works. Okay. So we've got a lot of kind of negative emotions coming up here. We got relief, which is, I think, the most positive emotion that we got in the room. I give a lot of psak, probably more than I rightly ought to give, because people often want psak from someone who shares their identities and or values. Here we are. And something I've been thinking about a lot lately is what does it mean to give psak ethically in a way that is a feminist psak, that is a leftist perspective on psak? Because psak in some ways is inherently about a power dynamic, right? There's the person who has the knowledge and the person who's seeking the knowledge. Or we could hit it even more strongly. There's the person who can grant permission or forbid something, and there's the person who's seeking that ruling. So even if it's just an imbalance of knowledge, there's already a power dynamic, but certainly if you have a theology of psak where the reality is created by the psak rather than just described by it, that is very high stakes. Okay, so our source sheet starts out with two Gemaras. I would like a volunteer to read one of them. You'll note I have brought them in the original and in translation. The translation is my edit of the Koren Steinsaltz version on Sefaria. So the bold is direct translation, and the not bold is interpolation intended to make things make sense because Aramaic is very sparse. Shira, thank you.
The sages taught, in the case of one who asks a question of a sage with regard to an issue of ritual impurity, and the sage rules that the item is impure, he may not ask the same question of another sage and have him rule that it is pure. Similarly, in the case of one who has asked a sage a halachic question and he deems it forbidden, he may not ask the question of another sage and have him deem it permitted.
Great. This might ring a bell if you are from currently or have spent time in communities that tend to think of psak as a normal activity, that regularly run halachic questions by authorities, right? The idea is you go to someone, they say, that pot is treif. You can't be like, oh, I'm not sure that's right. I'm going to go to the other guy and hope he says the pot is kosher. Okay. Who is this text about? Who is the text talking to?
The asker.
The asker. Excellent. That's exactly what I was fishing for. This text is about any of us who are going to go ask a rabbi a halachic question. This says if I ask the question and I don't like the answer, I should not go and get a second opinion. Okay, now let's look at the text from Chulin. Who's going to read this one for us? Alyssa is.
But isn't it taught in the Braita, if a halachic authority deemed an item not impure, another halachic authority is not allowed to deem it pure? Likewise, if he prohibited it, another authority is not allowed to permit it?
Great. Okay, so the question mark there is because I've pulled this from a different context where this is trying to prove something, but the context is not relevant for our proof. So who's this text about? Whose behavior is being dictated by this text?
The one being asked.
The one being asked, exactly. The person who I'm going to anachronistically for the Gemara call the Psak. So we've got the prohibition for the shoel, for the person who's asking, and for the Psak, for the person who's answering. What's the difference between these? Why do you think we might need both? How does it feel? Do these feel substantively different? Yeah.
Well, the person asking presumably knows that they've already asked someone else and gotten a different answer.
Great.
The person being asked needs to figure out if this person already has an answer from some other authority before being allowed to give an answer to the question.
Great, which could cut two ways, right? We could say, oh, you already asked Rabbi A, so Rabbi B is actually totally not on the hook if Rabbi B doesn't know that the question's already been asked. Or you could say, it's Rabbi B's responsibility to always say, tell me what research you've already done. Tell me how you've been relating to this. I need to ask my good questions and get a kind of a history. And only then can Rabbi B make a psak. Yeah.
There's also a different sort of calculus. For the asker, they genuinely do not have access to the ontological truth. Is
Great.
incorrect or not.
Excellent.
For the chata, they know, they might be 100% firmly convinced that someone else is posting wrong.
Right.
And so the calculation is then, do I correct what I am sure actually was a mistake at the cost of undermining the system?
Excellent. And an important nafkamina here, an important case that's going to show us distinctions between these two, is what direction do all of these move in? These cases are all someone prohibits, someone then cannot come in and permit, right? You can't move from stringency to leniency. Do either of these texts teach us anything obvious about if Rabbi A says, yes, that's permitted, and then the person is like, for some reason asks a second question, and Rabbi B says, no, it's prohibited? Do we know anything about that case from these two Gemaras? No. Great. So this is not just about power and kind of access to knowledge in a pure way. It also seems like there is a reluctance to move in a lenient direction from a stringency, but we don't know if maybe, right, if the principle is we don't want to disrespect the previous rabbi and their ruling stands, then it shouldn't matter if we're going in a direction of leniency or stringency. But if it's like, well, once someone said it's forbidden, we always are going to go with the more strict approach, no matter what order it happened in, that's a really different take. Okay, I'm going to put you in chavruta for a little bit. Whoa. But first, okay, so the title of this shiur has the word epistemic in it. I would like someone to give me a definition of epistemic. This is not a pop quiz. But before you go and talk about epistemic justice and injustice, tell me what epistemic means. Yeah.
How do you know what you know?
Great. Great. Epistemic is like the knowing of knowledge. Okay, what's hermeneutic? Yeah.
Think about interpretation, how we interpret things.
Great, yes. Interpretation and sometimes the rules for interpretation. So I'm going to have you read some very dense modern philosophy. If you've ever learned Gemara, it's like that, in that there's going to be a lot of words that you're using context to help you understand. Some words that you might know from elsewhere that don't mean something that don't mean the same thing here. And your goal here is to get what we might call a daf yomi read on Miranda Fricker. That is to say, what is the gist? I don't want an iyun reading where you could give me all the rishonim. I want you to be able to step back and be like, I think she's kind of saying this. Okay? So don't get too bogged down. We're gonna take, I'm gonna say 7-ish minutes. It's like a little bit before 4. At 4:05, we're gonna come back, find a chavrita. Not everyone takes for granted how chavrita learning should happen. What should happen in your chavrita? One or both of you reads the text out loud. Whether or not you are an auditory processor, reading the text out loud is a key part of chavrita as a practice. You can then take a break to read it to yourself if you need. You then discuss what you think the text is saying on a lowercase m meaning level, where you want to kind of get agreement between you and your chavrita, right? You want to feel like, oh, I think Fricker is arguing that the sky is blue, and if your chavrita says, oh, I think Fricker is arguing that the sky is pink, that's a problem. You want to make sure that you feel like you have a shared understanding of the text's claims. Then you go up to capital M meaning making, where you might say, you both agree that Fricker says the sky is blue, but one of you thinks it's a metaphor for the fact that we should always look on the bright side, and the other one thinks that it's about her experience of color blindness and how she got magically cured, right? That's meaning making where you can disagree. Make sense? Okay. You should focus on the first lowercase m kind of meaning making, because I'm giving you about 5 minutes to do this, and we're gonna come back and do some of the uppercase m. Any questions about your assignment? Okay. Make a new friend or don't make a new friend. I'm not the boss of you. in the middle of your conversations. Hello. Okay, we're going to do this collectively. I want to collect 3 to 5 points that you think Fricker is making. I want to hear 1 point from each person. Any person who would like to volunteer. What's one thing you think Fricker is saying from the delightful, rich stew of continental philosophy? Yes.
That when collective meaning-making and rule-making happens while excluding certain perspectives, then when those perspectives will then experience the collective rule-making at in conflict with their identity or their perspective.
Great.
Because they weren't part of that initial kind of.
Great. Excellent. Yes. Great. What else is Fricker saying? Yeah.
I think she's trying to reground the basic insights of the stance that we might call standpoint epistemology, or people who don't like it call it that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The idea that because you are a certain identity, you have a certain knowledge that other people who don't have that identity don't have. But to reground it in something that isn't based on an essentialized concept of identity.
Lovely. Yes. It's about who's been given access to the tools for knowing, rather than the knowledge coming from some inherent identity-based well.
Yeah.
Great. What else? What else felt important in Fricker? Yeah.
The access to knowledge and gatekeeping access to knowledge is self-perpetuating and strengthens itself over time as people continue to be excluded in the process of development.
Excellent. Because it's not just about knowledge qua facts, right? It's about knowledge as a set of skills or tools. Yeah, listen.
There's this bit where that my favorite pointed out to me, where many communications made by people who are in the marginalized group, they're not seen as rational.
Great.
They're not taken as valid.
Great. And in part, that's because they're not using the right tools, because they haven't been given the right tools, but then because they can't play the game on the terms of the people making the rules, their opinions are discounted or not taken seriously. Yeah.
This isn't a direct thing that she said, but it's kind of how she said it. I think that there's gotta be something ironic or tongue-in-cheek about how she's discussing how you have to use the language of the elite to get through to the elitists. And she's doing it in a way that all are sitting here and really trying to parse through, and it is just not in plain English at all.
Great. I think that is a broader question of how people in the discipline of academic philosophy see themselves that I'm not qualified to answer. See me later for my opinions on that. Yeah.
I think there's, maybe this was partially said already, but it's not just that people of marginalized groups are less able to communicate, but she's making the claim that they're less able to understand themselves.
Great. They're less able to understand what's going on, what's happening to them in their own lives because they don't have the kind of language, right? We might, on a really easy level, imagine that I experienced sexism as a woman rabbi, but I didn't know the word sexism or the concept. That would make my life a lot harder, right? As distinct from the fact of the sexism. Okay, what do you think this has to do with halacha? I kind of think it's leading. I've led you there. This is not a trick question. Yes?
I don't know. I always think about I know a lot of various underlying halachic principles, but I don't know how to get to the answer most of the time from there. And I always have to ask various rabbis or people who have a lot more training in how to navigate the flow of halacha.
Great. If you're trying to get to an answer, you might know components, but not the whole process, such that you can get to an answer that feels like it has integrity within the system, such that you know the system exists and you know the system has rules, but you don't know all the rules and how they fit together. And so you have to go to someone who does have that knowledge. Yeah.
Ironies, I'm not sure quite how to say this, but I think there's something to the effect of if I have a halachic question that is important to me and that I need to be answering about a very delicate subject in my life, if I don't know a lot about that subject matter, I'm not going to know necessarily which rabbis will give me which kinds of answers that may have radically different impacts on and if we're taking the Gemara and the Avodah Zarah including seriously, then that has major implications for not knowing what answer you're going to get.
Excellent. Right, so not only do you not necessarily have all the tools to get to the answer yourself, you are not well versed enough in knowing which specialist thinks which way about the thing, and would prioritize the same things you might want to prioritize to ask them. Right? The levels of inside baseball are they're very layered, exactly. Yes?
To reinforce that, also the two Gemaras you brought, the rabbis are giving one-word answers.
Great. So I'm not sure the Gemara is imagining the rabbis giving one-word answers as much as it's summarizing a scenario. It could be. We could read really generously and say they go to Posek A, and Posek A says, okay, well, I looked at the Ramban and the Tosfot and Rambam, and then the Shulchan Aruch Paskins like this, and then the Mishnah. This is obviously all an anachronism because they were Amorai. I don't know, depending on your theology of... It's possible, but you're right that here it's very binary, right? This is not a case where someone comes for Psak and gets what we might call not Psak, where the rabbi says, okay, well, I think you could do this or that, and the factors that would make you lean towards doing this are these, and the factors that would make you lean towards doing this are these, and now you have all the information, go ahead. Right? That's not Psak. And it is often preferred by rabbis in my milieu, often myself included. But that kind of thing is why I was interested in this topic, is because is that ethically better, or is that avoiding the actual power I have in the situation? Right? Am I giving the person access to the tools they need, or am I evading my responsibility because I'm actually giving them access only to the tools that I think that they need? Okay. This question is at least as old as the Gemara. Okay, what you need to know to understand this Gemara is this character Yalta is a very important woman. She's married to the sage Rabbi Nachman. What you also need to know is that the rabbis had an entire system of menstrual blood that was pure and impure based on colors. Primarily in niddah practice today, colors become a much smaller part of the rulings about what's pure and impure / makes a person need to go to the mikveh or not. But judgment of fine distinctions between blood colors was very, very common, and it was the Gemara would like us to believe it was very, very common and was a kind of key way that the ancient rabbis saw themselves as getting involved in niddah questions. And this was kind of proprietary knowledge in that it was not taught to everybody. And who among the everybody do you think it wasn't taught to? Right. Women and or anybody who menstruated, which at the time they seemed to think were the same thing. Okay, we're going to read this Gemara. We're going to go around, and I'm going to ask everyone to read a paragraph. Again, I have edited the Sefaria Koran translation because it gave us way too much, and I wanted it to feel at least a little bit more like the original Gemara. But again, bold is a direct translation, not bold is an interpolation to make it make more sense. And we're just going to popcorn it. I would read one chunk and then pause, and then I will interrupt because I have things to say. Yeah, Jonathan.
Yalta brought blood before Rabbi Bar and deemed her ritually impure. She then brought it before Rav Yitzchak, son of Rav Yehuda, and he deemed her pure.
Okay, so that seems like a problem. If you're enough in the halachic world, you think that the problem is that she's asking the same shaila to two poskim. If you're a little bit less in the halachic world and perhaps attuned to what is kind of normal, the problem might be, why is this lady showing her menstrual blood to a bunch of rabbis? And I actually don't want us to lose track of that. That the body gender power piece here is really alive. This is actually, I think, importantly distinct as a case from I was eating yogurt and then I put the spoon in my chicken soup pot.
Is the other also obvious thing of just this is confusing, what should she do? Is that also a problem here, or is that...
Can you spell out the question a little more?
It's just she asked one and it was ritually pure, and the other ritually impure. That what does she do then? I just
I see, right.
complex question of just
Seems usually in the Gemara, if there's two opinions and then it doesn't discuss them more, not always, but generally as a principle, we assume the second one wins.
Okay.
Not universal. Don't poskin based on any of this, but certainly not based on what I just said. Okay. But how could he act in this manner? Right? The Gemara has a Gemara-y problem and not our problem about gender. But isn't it taught in a Breita? Who's going to read this? Yeah.
But isn't it taught in a Breita? In the case of a halachic authority who deemed an item impure, another is not allowed to deem it pure. If one halachic authority deemed a matter prohibited, another halachic authority is not allowed to deem it permitted.
Great. So the problem here, who's the problem about? The rabbi. Great. How could he act in this manner? How could Rav Yitzchak be willing to paskin Yalta's niddah question when she's already got an answer? Okay, so now we're going to solve this. Okay, this is actually not a problem, you guys. Don't worry. Nobody's broken any rules. Okay, who's going to get this next bit? Yeah.
Initially, he deemed her impure, but he changed his mind when she said to him, "Every day I bring blood of this kind of this color to the Rabbi and he deems me pure." And specifically now he issued a different ruling as he feels clean in his eye, and he then deems her pure.
Okay, great. So someone tell me in your own words, what's the reason why Rav Yitzchak thinks it's okay that he paskins Lakula, that he says she is pure? Yeah.
He has new information.
Great, and what's the new information?
That she does this a lot.
Great, what's the other new information? There's a lot of new information here. What's the other important piece of new information?
The first Psak was having eye problems.
Great, the first guy was having eye problems. She's like, I bring blood this color all the time to the first guy, and he always says it's pure. And it's just this time, he had pink eye or something, and it was messing up his sense of sight. And then, once Rav Yitzchak heard that, he was like, oh, okay. This is an extenuating circumstance. I'm not actually paskening against my colleague, Rabbi Barbachana. Okay, does that kind of make sense from here? On a, comprehension level. Okay. We could just put a nice big check next to that and move right along. That's not what we're doing. So the Gemara's got a question. Someone tell me what the Gemara's question is by reading it. Yeah.
But are people deemed credible in cases like this? Yes, and likewise, it is taught in Breita. A woman is deemed credible if she says, "I saw blood like this color, but I lost it."
Okay. So our question is, do we believe Yalta just told Rav Yitzchak a story, right? Yalta was like, oh, normally I bring it to Rabbi Barbachana, and he always says it's fine, but this time he has an eye infection. And the question is, do we actually rely on her? There's a number of angles of do we actually rely on her, right? One of them is a woman giving reliable testimony? Another is, when a person is telling us something about their life that is halachically relevant, where they might be where one answer is clearly better for them than another, do we trust them generally? So there's a gender piece, but there's also if you asked me a shaila and I was like, well, how hot was the water in the sink? Because if it was hot enough to burn you, I would say it's probably more of a problem than if it wasn't. And then you say, it was kind of hot enough to burn me, I think. Not that a person is lying, but that those kinds of leading questions might make a person a little bit less reliable about facts. Okay. However, yes, we do. We believe people in cases like this. Because, so too, if a person is like, I saw menstrual blood come out of me that looked like this same color that I'm pointing to now on some other different, probably a different appearance of the same blood, of the same color, but I lost it, so I can't bring you the sample to evaluate, Rabbi. We do believe them. We generally believe people's testimony about specifically the physical facts of their niddah blood. Okay, but then we've got another problem. I thought we knocked this problem down and we're good now, and this whole story is still standing. We've got kind of sidebar quest here. Okay, who's gonna read this? I will start cold calling people. Yeah.
A dilemma was raised before the sages. If a woman states, my blood, which has an appearance like this, so-and-so, the Halachic authority deemed it pure. What is the Halacha?
Great, so the woman shows up, she's like, Rabbi Ploni already told me that this was fine last time, and I'm like, okay, but I don't know you, where do you come from? Do we trust them as a do we trust them not only about their blood, but about the ruling they were given about their blood, right? That adds another level, right? Not only is the question is the person not only credible about the things coming out of their own body, but are they credible to repeat accurately what they have been told by another rabbi? Come and hear a resolution. We're going to solve this question. How are we going to solve it? Yeah.
Come and hear a resolution to this dilemma from Baraita cited above. A woman is deemed credible if she says, I saw blood like this color, but I lost it. There it is different, as in the case that the blood, there it is different, as in the case that the blood is not before her, and therefore the same is relieved.
So that case is actually not totally analogous, because if you're looking at something that's an actual color, if you're looking at the actual blood itself, that's one thing. But if you're saying, oh, I lost it, then we can maybe be lenient. And in general, there's a halachic principle that when we're talking about blood stains in the category of niddah, and there's a case of doubt, we're always a little bit more lenient, right? If there's a case of doubt and your options are to be stringent or lenient, in a case of doubt with niddah blood stains specifically, we're lenient. But the absence of physical evidence matters here. Okay, we're not going to spend too much time on that. And we're going to move right along to, we're going back to our story. Yalta's back. Or we're talking about Yalta at least. She's not back. Yeah. What? Yes, I do.
Come in here, the incident cited above, as Yalta brought blood before Rabbi Bar, and he deemed her ritually impure. She then brought it before Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Rabbi Yehuda, and he deemed her pure. And the Gemara asked, how could Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Rabbi Yehuda, act in this manner? Isn't it taught in a Baraita? In the case of a halachic authority who deemed an item impure, another halachic authority is not allowed to deem it pure?
So back to our original question, right? Okay, we've kind of come in a circle a little bit. We've resolved a lot of inconsistencies along the way. We've got a different answer here. Right, so if the blood is not before her, we're like maybe a little more doubtful. But then we've come back to like, how is Rav Yitzchak doing this? Gemara answers, Rav Yitzchak relied on his studies. I.e., Rav Yitzchak was making this decision seemingly based on knowledge that he had, and he was not basing his decision on anything that Yalta was telling him. Right? It seems like he is basing his decision on things he knows from looking at the blood, rather than things he knows because Yalta is telling him. Because this is a different case than if someone came and said, I had a blood stain that looked like XYZ, because there you're relying on the person's testimony about XYZ. Here, the only thing to rely on is Yalta saying, Rabbi Baruchana had an eye issue, which is very different than Yalta saying, Yalta's testimony is not directly about the evidence. What's the story about? What's the point? That is a bad, facile question, and I'm asking it anyway. Yeah.
Can I ask a comprehension question?
Yes.
Is this last thing in the Bible studies, is this assuming that she was told them about taking the eye, or is this a different?
This is, the Rishonim read it as assuming yes. He relied on his studies. Rashi reads this as saying what that means is, it's not that he's listening to Yalta's testimony that Rabbi Baruchana would have said it was pure. It was that he, looking at it independently, would have thought it was pure. But he was worried because Rabbi Baruchana had said it was impure and he wouldn't want to rule against his colleague. But now that he has this other fact about his eye infection, he can.
So the ending is a combination of those two?
Yes. Yes.
You could imagine a thought bubble and Rabbi Yitzchak's mind asking, how do I convince people to take this whole halacha thing seriously, right?
Yeah.
Okay, he has the facts of his case in his own mind, and he has an opinion, and he has Yalta's statement. So, is she able to say something that is sufficiently credible that other people will take at face value to say he's not just undermining another chacham?
Right, excellent.
But that the integrity of the entire system is still taken seriously.
Great. I'm going to use that to ask another question. Okay. I'm going to ask you a yes or no question, and I'm going to ask for a show of hands in response to yes and a show of hands in response to no. You have to pick one. If I see any of this, I'm throwing you out of the room. This is a thought exercise. You do not have to stick with it.
Doesn't sound like epistemic justice.
I'm modeling epistemic injustice, but I'm giving you the tools to understand, I hope. Okay, so option A, do not raise your hands yet. I'm going to give you both options, and then I'm going to let you go. Option A is, this story shores up faith in rabbinic authority and the rabbinic system. It is strengthening the force of the halachic rabbinic system and rabbinic authority. Option B is, this story is tearing it down. Tearing it down being the strongest possible formulation. We might say, if that's too strong for you, we might say, this story is poking some holes, raising questions about rabbinic authority and the authority of the halachic system. Okay, option A, this story is supporting rabbinic authority. This is making the rabbis seem powerful, dominant. Okay. Okay. This story is challenging in some way the integrity authority of the halachic system. Okay, this is a beautiful, beautiful spread. Okay, I want to hear from Team A. If you were immediately like, this is a story about upholding halacha, upholding the system, upholding the power structures, upholding the authority. Yeah.
I would say it is upholding because they're using another rabbi to find another perspective as opposed to using her own experience.
Excellent. Okay. So, like, Yalta's experience is ultimately disregarded in some way. Like, they trust her testimony that the other rabbi had an eye infection, but by the end of the story, that's the only bit of Yalta's kind of voice that's affecting the Psak. Yeah.
The fact that this comes as a gada shows that the rabbis are seeing it as a potential challenge to their authority and are thus discrediting it in their own retelling by putting it in the mouth of a woman, first of all, which to the rabbis very much is to discredit it, and additionally turning the conversation back to focus on how rabbinic thought works and how determining halachic decisions works, rather than focusing on the reality that they have just totally given as assumed that a woman needs to come to a rabbi with these questions, which has no question at all.
Somebody either assigned you Christina Hayes or taught you about Christina Hayes' idea without citing them, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah?
I mean, I'd say that the story is at its core about the dignity of Rabbi Bar that it's about, the dignity of a sage who has made evidently an error, right? An obvious error.
Great.
And I'm not even sure that we could say that Rabbi Yitzchak is relying on Yalta's testimony. He's relying on the fact that he can see that Rabbi Bar has made an error.
Great. By the end of the Gemara, that's where we are.
What?
By the end of the Gemara, it's clear that that's where we are.
Yeah. It's not,
the Gemara takes us there. Yeah. Great. Okay, if you were on Team B, you were like, this story is about undermining or challenging the complete picture of rabbinic authority the Gemara wants us to believe. Why'd you say that? Yeah.
We have two Loreto quoted in this, and both of them are just thrown out by the end. And both of them are authoritative sources. Like the Gemara would have just shut it down and been like, we should have stuck by Rabbi Bar if we wanted to follow by halacha.
Interesting. So we're giving reasons why it was okay to do something different.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like the system undermining the system in that sense, in your reading.
It seems like a conscious choice to not, it lays out the system, and then it says, here's this other way that we chose to go with it that's now part of the system, but wasn't part of the system beforehand.
So it's kind of like integrating, right? In some ways it's like naturalizing objections to the system within the system.
Yes.
So you two actually aren't saying something so different, you're just reading it differently in terms of what the kind of how we ought to conclude about that. Yeah. Yeah, Shira.
I don't know exactly how to phrase this, but I think that it is kind of demonstrating kind of a fallback measure, where instead of saying I have the authority based on the halachic world I'm in to make a further decision, it's just saying I'm going to just fall back to vertical precedent here instead of taking this case as unique. And the act of saying there is vertical precedent above me, so I'm not going to make a decision here. I'm just going to kind of fall back on the situation at hand. is in some ways a weakening of halachic authority, in that it's saying like this rabbi cannot be an authority. In this unique case, he has to defer to a case that is different than his unique case, and doing so might be in protection of the, the man whose feelings he cares about, rather than perhaps the woman in front of him whose feelings he doesn't care about as much. But it demonstrates a bit of a weakness of the strength of the halachic system to defer to the feelings of this rabbi.
So that the kind of like cool logic thing isn't winning because of our kavod for Rabbi Bar Chana, and we have to do a whole song and dance to get to a point where it's okay to override Rabbi Bar Chana.
Yeah, which might make the halachic decisors more powerful, but it doesn't make the halachic system more powerful.
Great. That it's like ultimately the system, the people in the system and the system are kind of distinct, and we're maybe honoring one at the cost of believing that the kind of like pure logic world of halachas should such a thing exist.
It's like it's the protecting of somebody's name over the following the laws and the rights as they're written.
As a kind of. And okay, great. So something I want to pull our attention to is that, especially in Shir's answer, but to some degree in all of these answers, there were different assumptions about whether or not there is objective halachic truth. Right? You're like, there's an objective halachic truth, and they're overriding it which is that Yalta's blood is pure, and they're overriding it out of preference for the honor of Rabbi Bar Chana. What's another option? Option A, there's objective halachic truth, and a posek can be right or wrong. Yeah.
Halachic truth only exists if you believe in rabbinic authority in the first place, and so if you discredit it, then there is no halachic truth, and thus no need to discredit it.
Okay, but even more so.
And even more so, like rabbinic authority is determined by all of this like power plays and respecting people's names and not like throwing out someone's opinion and wanting to like find a way to make it right. Because if you undermine your colleague, then your colleague has no more power, and thus the whole system has lost power.
Great. We can also say that, like, the validity of halacha depends on what halacha does, or what poskim do. There's a fascinating ravid that basically all of the other Rishonim freak out about and try to limit. But the Ravad, who is a Tosafist, that's what you need to know, says that the reason that the second rabbi cannot rule the item pure is because it has become a chatichat isor, which is to say it becomes like a piece of isor. That's not a good translation, you guys. Like, it becomes a prohibited item fundamentally. Which is to say that, like, when Rabbi A says this piece of meat is treif, the piece of meat actually takes on a treif status. It is not that Rabbi A is describing it and Rabbi B could be like, no, your description was incorrect. It's that it has actually been, the object itself has taken on metaphysically a status, which is distinct from the, like, halacha is describing and can describe less accurately or more accurately, right? We might say, so on that reading, right, maybe the problem isn't about the accuracy of, isn't like, oh, is Rabbi Bar Chana describing it right? It's maybe whether or not he like originally was like wrong and somebody else would have said it is pure. Once he has said it is impure, there might be kind of, he's created facts. It's impure. Like, ontologically, you cannot go back and make it pure because it is now a different thing. And then all three Rishonim are kind of like, so your role, like this sugya obviously poses a problem for that theory of what Psak is, in that it does get undone, and so they have to say, oh, well, if it was a mistake about the realia, or if it was a mistake about, like, if it was like clearly a mistake about the inherited tradition, then like, we can kind of soften that. But fundamentally, I think that's those are two kinds of approaches to Psak, among many. Right? There's a sense of like, how many of you have ever asked for Psak about something, and you know, and I'm gonna pick on you a little bit, and like felt like, okay, great, it's out of my hands now. Great. That's like the relief piece, right? And I've said this to people. I've been like, if you're having strafe, that's on me now. I'll deal with it when I get to Shemayim. Right? There's a sense of like, you've like kind of handed over all the power and authority. The facts are the facts. And it's not like a person can like go get a second opinion because the reality is the reality. It's like, once I tell you your oven is kosher, your oven is kosher to you, is one way of believing that Psak works. As opposed to saying like, which is also a kind of more mystified version of what rabbis are, right? That's the like, in certain ways, that is actually, that approach to Psak, which is a kind of a pretty firm approach to Psak, is the exact same as, oh, kosher means blessed by a rabbi, right? It's the like, the authority figure has the, like, changes something about the item itself. As opposed to like, okay, well, like Ashkenazim generally would do X, Sephardim would do Y. You're in a case that I would see as kind of b'diavad. So if you want to be machmir, I would follow the Ashkenazi position because you're Ashkenazi, but like you would have grounds to rely on the Sephardi position, like have a nice day. You're like, what do I do? And for some people, that's exactly what you want. Which of those ways is more ethical to give psak, do you think? 2. You think 2. You were immediately 2.
100%.
100%.
Yeah, sorry, which is 1 and which is 2?
What a good question. 1 is psak creates ontological reality, and 2 is psak is about expertise, and the right way is to give over as much of that expertise as possible. Is that like, the only special thing that I have as a rabbi is that I spent a bunch of time in yeshiva. Anybody could do that. The smicha cloth isn't magic. Yeah.
As someone who offers that kind of advice a lot, you can watch the overwhelm just descend on this poor person who has often just come to receive a clear yes or no answer in a way that is based in a sociological reality where the rabbis, the people are looking for some clear answer, but often a specific one, and just the idea of needing to piece together one's own halachic answers in the absence of any kind of like traditional frame of how to weigh Ashkenazi or Sephardi is just totally anxiety-inducing.
Great. And I think a lot of that has to do with epistemic injustice, right? No matter how much information I give people, if people don't have the tools to make the decisions with the information that I'm giving them, it will always be easier for me to say, no, the pot's just treif. Pot's not usually treif. It's very hard to treif a pot. I mean, don't try. And the question then becomes also like, how much can any individual poseket alleviate epistemic injustice? This comes up a lot. The reason I was interested in this topic initially is that I answer a lot of people's niddah questions. And a lot of ways to end up in a more lenient place on niddah is to tell people to ignore evidence of their bodies, right? Oh, you're having a lot of like blood spotting in your underwear that make it hard for you to formally exit a niddah status? Wear black underwear. That's the like accepted psak. Your job is to know less about yourself so you can be tahor. And that's pretty messed up. And so in some cases, right, the less knowledge a person has, the better off they are halachically in terms of getting to a lenient place, or a place of permissiveness, or a place of, I don't want to say lenient or permissive, like a place of heter, a place of things are allowed. And that comes at a cost. And so my question is it ever ethical to give psak? Like, is the only truly ethical option for everyone to go to yeshiva? Like, is that the only ethical way? I mean, like, I'm pro that generally anyway, but like, so with that question in mind, we're gonna read one more source. There is a beautiful machloket between Rachel Adler and Charlotte von Robert on what is going on with this Yalta story. I didn't bring you the von Robert because I didn't have enough time, and I decided to give Adler the final word out of kavod. But if you're interested, I'll send you the article. So this is Rachel Adler, important Jewish feminist theologian, reading What is Yalta doing here? Because I imagine, this room is a very nice mix of people who are usually psak askers and usually psak offerers. People who you might relate to as usually psak offerers are also usually regular psak askers. Like, I had a whole tofu on Pesach thing that I was like, someone who's not me needs to. Which is also, we get to the like reliability of the data you're getting and if you can trust someone who's got a stake in the game. But I would like someone to read out loud Rachel Adler and what's going on with Yalta. It goes on to the next page, by the way. There's one paragraph on the next page. Yeah.
There are 2 ways of reading the narrative, one of which is considerably less destabilizing than the other. One could argue that Yalta is a mere lasting, accurate assessment of evidence and consistency of judgment.
Great. She's like, this just doesn't seem, like, this is just kind of factually wrong and I would like the facts to be correct. Or?
But a darker, more ironic reading results if we assume that Yalta's account of Rabbi Bar Hana's turning to a second judge is not intellectual distaste for legal inconsistency, but is due to a desire to avoid the stigma of impurity. That is the reading we would do if we regarded the story as a folk tale of justice, and if we viewed Yalta as the trickster in the tale, the folkloric prankster who incarnates and unmasks what is arbitrary, chaotic, or unjust in our universe. As a distinctively rabbinic trickster, Yalta is a kind of legal gorilla. She exposes the hidden relativity of the law and the hidden fallibility of its interpreters. The purportedly divine Torah must be translated into authority. The variety seeks to protect this authority and its appearance of objectivity through a policy of judicial solidarity. But as soon as Yalta can expose dissent beneath this solidarity, she can demonstrate that the authority is not infallible. Two disagreeing authorities cannot coexist. If authority is divisible, it is potentially manipulable. If it is fallible, it is open to critique. If authority is human, it is vulnerable. If a judge's human pain may distort his judgment, perhaps his particular human perspective may also skew his rulings. The authority passing judgment on women's blood, Yalta slyly suggests, has a beam in its eye, and that is why it mistakenly calls the blood impure.
Okay, so Yalta's messing around with the system in Adler's reading. Right, there's a read of this story where Yalta's so from. She's like, oh, but I got another Psak last time and I just want to double check. And then there's a read of this story where Yalta's like, are you serious right now? She's like, I know my body, I know which colors of my blood are like halachically problematic and not. Keep in mind she's also the wife of a rabbi who in the Gemara are often the most educated women figures we see. And Yalta is like, absolutely not. I'm going to show you all that all of this is kind of made up. Not made up in the sense that there's like no halacha and halacha doesn't matter, but made up in the sense that the poskim are people, they are affected by all kinds of factors, and that Yalta can undermine the system. When I asked you earlier, do you think this sugya undermines the system or shores it up? That's basically the von Robert-Adler debate. But either way, even von Robert thinks that there's Yalta's kind of poking through as a moment of rabbinic self-doubt in certain ways, per Christine Hayes' general teaching that often the rabbis will put questions about their own authority that they don't want to ask themselves in the mouths of non-Jews and women. So what does this mean? How do you ethically ask for Psak? How do we incorporate what Yalta is doing here? Maybe Adler's read of what Yalta is doing here. What does it mean to have an ethical posek-shoel relationship? Yeah.
I think the first thing is it's actually incumbent on the posek to understand who is coming to you. Right? Is the person coming to you someone who can handle a multifaceted answer where you
Great.
have options or not?
Great. And it's also, sometimes it can be a different, right? Sometimes it's the same person. If someone texts me a question about heating up food on Shabbos on Monday afternoon, I'll give them a dissertation. If it's Friday at 5, I will say yes or no. And then I'll say, follow up next week if you're interested.
I think it's also a lesson to the person asking that it's going to answer the answer the person's being asked. Like, it's helpful to know why the person's asking.
Great.
Right? Like, if I'm like I sometimes I'll go to a guy and I'm like, I have this problem. I'm fine if you say no, and it's totally chill if you say no. I just like want to know what the answer is. Versus like, I have this question and I'm having a really hard time with it, and I need the either psak behind it or clerical care behind it, or both, for the answer that you are going to give me. Like sometimes it's that deep, but sometimes it's not that deep.
Great.
And like being able to like either ask how deep is it, or ascertain how deep is it, or for me to go, this time it's not that deep.
Great, yes, right? Sometimes a spoon is about a spoon, and sometimes a spoon is about someone's relationship with their mother whose kitchen isn't kosher. And you kind of need to know that to give responsible psak. Which also goes to, in the sense of epistemic justice here means both, I also assume that there are concrete pieces of knowledge and frameworks that I might not have. Right? That I'm going to say, actually, I cannot make these decisions without knowledge that you have. I'm not the only bearer of knowledge and frameworks. Yeah.
Thinking of this as if I hate to do it, but it's important to go there. It talks about the power being intertwined in every single social relation. But it's like atomic building blocks of our social reality.
Great.
That there are always social dynamics at play in every single conversation that we have. And that's no less true if you're giving a yes or no answer versus a nuanced twist answer.
Yeah.
So maybe the best that we can do in some cases is to be totally clear of what are our moral and intellectual commitments coming in, such that even if a person doesn't understand the answer that is given, they understand what are the underlying existential ways of being that are prompting you to respond to that.
Excellent.
While acknowledging that the power is not going.
Yeah. And because that's a form of transparency where we might be operating with the same level of access to a hermeneutic interpretation of the world around us. Okay, so part of why I think this is important is not just how should people ask when they answer or ask halachic questions, but I think it's similar, actually building off of what you said. Adrienne Marie Brown talks about how the communities we build are microcosms of the world we're trying to build. And something that I think really can matter in our Jewish communities is how are we relating to authority and expertise in ways that are actually healthy, and ways that are generative, and in ways that are liberatory, rather than in ways that really put the people with expertise and knowledge up on a pedestal, and they are different fundamentally from all of the other people. And how do we instead build a relationship to authority in Jewish communities around how we do halacha that is building the same kind of relationship to authority that we want to have in the world writ large? And we want it to be as close as possible to democratic and liberatory, and taking into account different experiences, and knowing who knows what and who doesn't know what. And I think that halacha can be a playing field to either make those skills in ourselves worse or better. And so this is my invitation to try to do it better. All right, that's my time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much for teaching. I want to say thanks to all of our teachers, to Rabbi Klopper, Rabbi Weiner at Taliv, and Rabbi Halpern. Thanks for the Cambridge Community Center for having us. There's, as you might have heard, there's a honky-tonk dance going on. It's actually being organized by someone from my synagogue, so you can check it out. And yeah, feel free to take any food. I think that's all I have to say. Yeah.
Thank you, Nino.
Thank you.